109 degrees. I've lived my whole life in Texas, but I had never seen pavement look like it was ready to burst into flames. When the gauge inside my truck ticked past 109 degrees Fahrenheit, all I could think about was getting home fast, opening the garage, sinking into the armchair with Rusty, my old golden retriever. But that day, Dallas didn't just hit me with the heat. It hit me with an image so haunting that even now, when I close my eyes, I still see it. Out there, in the middle of a shimmering fire mirror of an avenue, I spotted a small shadow. A Doberman puppy. Blackened with dirt, so thin she was nothing but skin and bone, she was dragging herself inch by inch. Her back legs wouldn't move. She pulled them behind her across the blistering asphalt, every crawl tearing her body raw. I could hear the scrape of claws on pavement, sharp with pain. Rusty gave a low growl from the passenger seat, his eyes locked outside. I knew. He saw what I saw. For a second, the pup lifted her head. Those eyes, they weren't just hunger or thirst. They were eyes familiar with abandonment, eyes used to people not stopping. She struggled toward the other side of the road where a scrap of shade waited, but just a few steps short, her small body shuddered and collapsed, motionless. I heard myself say it out loud. Dear God, she's going to die. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming against the asphalt. I threw the door open and ran. The heat hit my face like a whip of fire. I knelt down and lifted her. My God, she was lighter than an old, sweat-soaked shirt. It felt as if I didn't hold her tight. She'd turned to dust in my arms. Rusty followed close, planting himself between the sun and her fragile body, ears pinned as if he understood. I laid her down beneath the shadow of a telephone pole. Her breaths were shallow, chest rising and falling like a frayed thread ready to snap. I twisted open my water bottle and dripped a few drops onto her cracked lips. At first, nothing. My hands shook. I thought I was too late, but then her tongue twitched. One drop slid down, then another, and another. My chest released like a knot undone. I whispered, That's it. Drink, sweetheart. I'm here. Her eyes flickered open. In that clouded gaze, I caught a glimmer. Just a spark, but enough to send a shiver through me. I've lived 60 years. I've been through war. I've buried the wife I shared 30 years with. I've endured the silence of an empty house for a decade. But never, never had I seen eyes like that before. Eyes clinging, grateful, as if the whole world had turned away, but still left behind a single fragile thread. Rusty sat beside her, lowered his head and licked her trembling paw. That gesture was a vow. From now on, you're not alone. I looked at them both, an old golden giant and a frail little shadow, half dead on the roadside. I saw myself in them. I saw the loneliness, the sorrow I had carried for years, and in that moment, I understood. If I walked away, she wouldn't be the only one to die. I'd lose my last chance to pull myself out of the abyss. I placed my hand on her chest, felt the stuttering rhythm of her heart, broken, but still there. I whispered, She's going to live. I promise. Rusty lifted his head, eyes shining, as if to agree. I scooped her up and hurried back to the truck. Her body burned hot as coals against me, every breath a final battle. But I knew this much. When I pulled her off that road, I pulled a piece of my own heart out of the silence it had been buried in for years. I held the little one tight in my arms and rushed back to the truck. Her skin burned like fire, her body trembling in waves. With every step, I could hear her heart pounding erratically, faint, muffled, like a drum wrapped in cloth. Rusty stayed close beside me, his eyes fixed on the frail shadow in my arms, as if he knew that one slip, 1 second of neglect, and we'd lose her forever. I laid her gently in the back seat, wrapping her in my sweat-soaked shirt. As the truck rolled forward, I kept glancing back. Her eyes were half closed, breath ragged. A weak whimper escaped. I reached over, patting her head softly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a little longer. We're not done yet." Rusty pressed close, nudging his head against her tiny body. I swear, I had never seen such sorrow in my old dog's eyes. He knew. He understood how fragile her life was. When I spotted a roadside diner, I braked hard. I couldn't wait any longer. I carried her inside, asking for a bowl of fresh water. The owner, an older woman, widened her eyes at the sight. "Dear Lord, is it still alive?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I knelt down, placed the pup on the cool cement floor, and trickled water onto her cracked lips. At first, her head sagged, limp and unresponsive. My hands shook. I thought I was too late. But then, her tongue moved. 1 drop slid down, then another, and another. I exhaled like a weight had been lifted. "That's it, Hope. Drink. I'm right here." Her cloudy eyes fluttered open, and in that murky gaze I caught a flicker, thin as a thread, but it was light. The light of a life that had not given up. Rusty lowered his head, licking gently at her paw. My throat tightened. In that instant, the 3 of us were bound together by a silent vow. We would walk through this storm side by side. After letting her rest for about an hour, I tried offering some soft food. I wasn't sure she could eat, but when I set the dish down, she lifted her neck, sniffed, and began to nibble. Slowly at first, then faster. Hungry, desperate, as if afraid someone would take it away. I watched, my heart swelling with relief and sorrow all at once. This tiny life had suffered so long that eating and drinking again felt like a miracle. When the dish was licked clean, she lifted her head and looked at me. Those eyes, no longer hollow with despair. Now there was something different. Gratitude, trust, and yes, a smile. Dogs do smile. Hers was faint, but it tore down the walls of loneliness inside me. I stroked her head gently and whispered, "You're strong, little one. You've earned a name. From this day on, you're Hope, because you just showed me that hope never dies, even when everything seems lost." Rusty gave a single bark, as if in agreement. The diner's owner dabbed at her eyes and said softly, "Take her to the hospital." "Don't wait." I nodded, lifting Hope back into my arms. Dallas still burned like an oven, but inside me, a stream of cool water had begun to flow. On the road to the animal hospital, I kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting near her, whispering over and over, "We're almost there. You're going to be okay. Don't give up." Hope I knew, in that moment, that saving her wasn't just about rescuing a dog. It was about rescuing myself, rescuing the part of my heart that had gone cold for 10 long years. And somehow, I was certain, the 3 of us, me, Rusty, and Hope, had just begun a journey none of us ever expected. The animal hospital came into view after the turn, its faded neon sign flickering under the brutal Dallas sun. I slammed the brakes, scooped Hope into my arms, and ran inside. Rusty followed close, barking once, sharp, urgent, making the receptionist jump. "Emergency! Back leg's paralyzed!" I nearly shouted. The ER doors swung open. Nurse Maya, petite and quick, pushed out a gurney. Hope was laid down, her body trembling, eyes half shut. My wrinkled hand clenched tight, as if I could press strength into her frail frame. Rusty's eyes stayed locked on her, ears forward, refusing to leave her side. Then Dr. Ben Cole appeared, in his 50s, With a calm face, eyes seasoned with years of experience, he knelt, brushed his hand over Hope's head. "Easy, little one. You're safe now." Then he looked at me and gave a small nod. "We'll do everything we can." The examinations began. Clippers shaved away the matted fur, exposing raw sores down her hips and belly, silent testimony to the days she dragged herself across blistering pavement. My stomach twisted when I saw the bleeding around her hindquarters, rubbed raw by constant friction. "Dear God," I muttered, hands shaking. Maya explained gently. "This is from dragging her body too long. The wounds are deep. We'll treat them right away." Dr. Cole pressed along her legs, testing for response. Hope whimpered, but didn't move. My chest hollowed out. "Are the bones broken?" I rasped. "We'll need x-rays to be certain." In the dark imaging room, the flash lit up her fragile frame. I stood outside the glass, my palm pressed against the door. Rusty leaned against my leg, resting his head on my knee, as if praying with me. The images came back. Dr. Cole frowned. "No fractures in the legs. But—" He paused, drawing in a breath. "The spine. Her lower back is broken. Severe nerve damage. That's why her back legs are paralyzed." The words cut like blades. My knees buckled against the cold metal chair. Rusty whined, eyes never leaving Hope. "Is there any way—" My voice cracked. Dr. Cole sat down and met my eyes squarely. "The chance of her walking again is almost zero. We can save her life, heal the wounds, restore her weight, even fit her with a wheelchair. But her back legs are moving on their own? The odds are very, very slim." I went silent. Images rushed back. Hope collapsing on the street, her eyes pleading, her weak cry when she first tasted water. I knew the fight for life was still there, however faint. I tightened my fist, lifted my head. "Even if it's 1%, I'll fight for it. Do everything you can. I won't abandon her again." Dr. Cole's eyes softened. He nodded. "All right. We'll start immediately. First, full cleaning, removing matted fur and disinfecting the sores. Then fluids, antibiotics, and pain relief. After that, we'll discuss spinal treatment." I sat beside Rusty, voice low. "She has a name now." "Her name is Hope." Maya smiled, her eyes warm. "That's a beautiful name. And it suits her perfectly." 2 hours later, I was still in the hallway, listening to the suction machines, the sound of water rinsing wounds. Every whimper from Hope pierced me. Rusty lay at my side, head on my leg, eyes sorrowful but steady. Finally, Maya stepped out. "Her wounds are cleaned. We've started fluids and antibiotics. But you need to be prepared. She's very weak. We're racing against time." I stood, walked in. Hope lay there, wrapped in bandages, eyes closed. But when I drew close, her eyelids flickered, opening just a sliver to meet mine. In that weary gaze, I caught the faint spark I had seen earlier in the day. I bent down, whispering, "Listen, Hope. You're not fighting alone. I'm here. Rusty's here. We're a family now." She didn't answer, only breathed softly. But I knew. She heard me. The next morning, the Dallas sun spilled through the hospital's cold corridor. I sat there, hand gripping Rusty's leash tight. Hope was being prepped for surgery. Dr. Cole had been clear. High risk. But if we don't try, we'll never know what chance she really has. I nodded, my voice shaky but firm. Do it. She deserves her chance. Rusty kept his eyes locked on the OR doors, nose twitching. I bent down, stroking his head. We've got to trust them, old boy. But I know you're as scared of losing her as I am, aren't you? Quick footsteps echoed down the hall. Maya gestured. You can watch from the glass. But you'll have to stay outside. I followed her to the white room. The surgical lights blazed overhead. Hope lay still on the steel table, her tiny body wrapped in wires and tubes, a ventilator rising and falling with her breath. My chest tightened. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered, Hold on, Hope. We're right here. The surgery began. The scalpel traced a clean line across her lower back. Dr. Cole's hands were steady, each motion deliberate. The monitor beeped rhythmically. Beep, beep, beep. I counted every beat. Maya suctioned blood and dabbed gauze. High spinal pressure, Doctor, Cole muttered. Prep decompression tools. I bit down hard on my lip. Rusty pressed against my leg, eyes glued to Hope. I laid my hand on his head, as if the two of us were praying together. Suddenly the monitor faltered. The line slowed. Then, one long, piercing tone. The whole room erupted. Maya shouted, Cardiac arrest! Cole barked, Epinephrine, now! The syringe plunged. My knees buckled. I slid against the wall, chest collapsing under the weight of it. Rusty sprang up, barking so loud it shook the hall. My throat closed, pain tearing through me like my heart had shattered. Seconds stretched like eternity. Then, beep, beep. The machine came back, weak but steady. I dropped into the chair, head in my hands, sobbing. Rusty licked my fingers as if to say, She's still here. She's still with us. Inside, Cole pressed on. He lifted tissue off the nerves, stitched layer by layer. Sweat streaked his brow, but his eyes never wavered. I knew he was fighting with every ounce of his skill and heart. Nearly 3 hours later, the OR doors swung open. Cole pulled off his mask and walked toward me. I jumped to my feet, heart pounding. Surgery was a success, he said hoarsely. We relieved the spinal pressure. But this is only the beginning. She'll need time, treatment, and patience. Are you ready for that? I nodded, voice breaking. As long as there's a chance, I'll walk every step with her. Rusty let out a soft whine, as if sealing the vow. When they let me in, Hope was still on the recovery table, her body swaddled in bandages, the ventilator tube rising and falling with each fragile breath. I bent low, my trembling hand resting on her head. You hear me, Hope? You made it through. I'm proud of you, and I promise we'll keep going, one step at a time, until you stand again. Her eyelids fluttered. A glimmer of moisture clung to the corner of her eye. Maybe it was just the light, but to me, it was a signal. She had heard me. She knew we were there. That night, I didn't leave the hospital. Rusty curled at my feet, eyes fixed on the recovery room. I listened to the steady beeping of the monitor, the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. In the darkness, my thoughts drifted to my wife, to the lonely years, to the empty spaces no one could fill. I whispered in my heart, Do you see this, Sarah? I've found a reason to keep going again. Her name is Hope. When they wheeled Hope out of surgery, her tiny body wrapped in white bandages, I nearly stopped breathing. She lay motionless, but the heart monitor still flickered, slow, steady beats. I touched her head gently and whispered, You made it through, Hope. Now we start all over again. Rusty pressed his nose against her bandaged paw and gave it a tender lick. The sight blurred my eyes. An old dog and a fragile pup. 2 lives, 2 stories, now bound together by something invisible. The first day after surgery felt like the longest of my life. Hope lay unconscious, the silence broken only by the machines and the echo of nurses' shoes down the cold hallway. I stayed planted in my chair, not moving an inch. Rusty rested his head on my knee, eyes heavy with sadness. By late afternoon, sunlight streaked gold across the window pane. Hope's eyelids trembled. I held my breath, leaned close. Her eyes opened, cloudy but searching. I held out my hand. And then, a miracle. She tried to lick my finger. "Oh, God!" My voice cracked as tears spilled. "You hear me? You're staying with me, aren't you?" Rusty gave a soft bark, like an answer. "On day 2, Doctor." Cole began acupuncture. Tiny needles lined her spine. Hope whimpered, but endured. "Acupuncture releases endorphins, eases pain, stimulates the nerves," he explained. I nodded, clutching Rusty's leash, whispering silent prayers. That afternoon, Maya brought out a tray of special food, shredded chicken porridge mixed with vitamins and protein. At first, Hope turned her head away, but I stayed patient, spoon by spoon. Minutes later, she began to eat. Slowly, then steadily. By the end, the dish was clean. It felt like witnessing the second miracle. By day 5, we started passive physical therapy. Maya showed me how to gently bend and stretch Hope's legs, rotate her hips to keep the muscles alive. Hope whimpered, her eyes clouded with pain. I whispered, "Patience, sweetheart." Every stretch is a step closer to the sunlight. Rusty never left her side, sometimes nudging her cheek as if lending his strength. Time moved forward, and small details became great victories. The empty dish after each meal. Her ears perked up when I called her name. Her tail tapped against the bed whenever Rusty came near. Each moment etched itself into me, like a soldier marking milestones on a long march. But not every day was bright. On day 12, Hope suddenly stopped eating. She turned her face to the wall, eyes dull, unresponsive even when Rusty touched her. Panic surged through me. I called Doctor Cole. He examined her, then shook his head. "Not physical. This is emotional. Too much time in a hospital. Depression sets in. She needs fresh air." A home, I understood. I'd spent years staring out my own window, wondering if life still held meaning. Hope was feeling that same hollow dark. I turned to Cole, my voice firm. "Let me take her home. I'll bring her back for therapy every morning, I promise. But she needs to live, not just survive." Cole studied me, then nodded. "All right. But you'll have to stay committed." That night, I carried Hope out of the hospital. Rusty circled the car, tail wagging wildly. For the first time in days, I saw a faint light in Hope's eyes. As I turned onto the familiar road home, I whispered, "We'll walk through this darkness. Tomorrow the sun will rise, and you'll see you're never alone again." Rusty let out a long sigh, resting his head on my shoulder. Hope lay against my chest, eyes half closed. And I knew. The true journey back to life had only just begun. On the first day I brought Hope home, I laid a soft blanket in the corner of the living room where the morning light always fell. Rusty paced the space, sniffing every corner, as if making sure it was safe enough for the new member of our family. Hope lay still, her eyes uncertain, but not as clouded as they had been in the hospital. I sat beside her, gently patting her side. "This is our home now, Hope. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Rusty walked over and dropped an old toy, a worn-out rubber ball, right in front of her. I laughed, my eyes stinging. "Son, you sure know how to say welcome." Hope sniffed the ball, her ears twitching ever so slightly. That small gesture was enough for me to feel a door opening inside my chest. On the second day, I introduced Hope to the pet wheelchair I'd hurried to buy. At first, when I strapped the harness around her belly, she trembled, eyes wide with confusion. Rusty circled her, tail wagging furiously as if cheering her on. I bent low and whispered, "It's all right, sweetheart. This isn't a burden. These are your new legs." I nudged her forward. The wheels rattled across the backyard pavement. Hope staggered, uncertain, but then she took a few steps. Rusty bounded ahead, barking over his shoulder. My heart raced, and I couldn't help blurting out, "That's it, Hope! You're doing it!" Her eyes lit up, her tail giving the faintest wag, a tiny signal, but enough to tell me she was beginning to believe in herself. In the days that followed, therapy became our rhythm of life. Mornings at the clinic for acupuncture, hydrotherapy in the warm water tank, and electrical stimulation. Afternoons at home, where I built a small wooden frame in the yard so she could practice resistance training. There were times she collapsed, sprawled flat, her eyes weary as if she wanted to quit. I knelt beside her, holding her tiny paw. "No, Hope. Don't give up. One step today will be 10 steps tomorrow." I fell once, too, but Rusty helped me stand again. "Now it's your turn." Rusty stepped in, pressing his nose against her cheek, letting out a soft bark. And somehow, that was enough for her to try once more. On the 19th day, a true miracle happened. I placed Hope into the standing frame. She braced herself, and then those paralyzed hind legs twitched. At first I thought I had imagined it, but then her toes jerked again. I froze, tears welling instantly. I shouted, "Maya! Dr. Cole! She's responding." Through the video call, Maya's voice rang out, "Positive reflex." "Sir, her nerves are beginning to respond." I turned to Rusty. He barked wildly, leaping around me. I threw my arms around him, sobbing, "We saw it, old boy." "She's coming back." Hope looked up at me, her eyes brighter than I'd ever seen. She didn't understand the science, but I knew she felt it. She had just won another battle for her life. That evening, as the sunset cast gold across the backyard, I sat in my old armchair. Rusty lay at my feet while Hope rested her head on my lap. For the first time in years, the house pulsed with breath and heartbeat. It no longer felt empty. I whispered, my voice trembling, "Hope, you're not just learning how to walk again. You're teaching me how to live again." Rusty lifted his head, his gentle eyes affirming the truth. And I realized, miracles don't come in a flash. They arrive slowly, through every bead of sweat, every wobbly step, every tender lick from an old dog standing faithfully by. A month after the surgery, Dallas finally gave us a rare, gentle morning. The early sun poured gold across the backyard. I opened the door, drew a deep breath, then looked over at Hope lying on her old blanket. Rusty stood close by, tail whipping like he already knew this was the big day. I bent down and stroked Hope's head. "All right, sweetheart. Let's try one more time." Just 5 steps, I lifted her into the training frame, my hands trembling with nerves. Rusty circled us, barking short bursts of encouragement. Hope sagged for a moment, panting hard, but then her eyes locked on the sunlight at the far end of the yard. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted, choking back tears. At the 5th step, Hope pushed forward. Her hind legs, still and lifeless for so long, lifted, shaky but real. I froze. "Oh, Lord," I gasped, tears flooding. "You did it, Hope!" Rusty barked and danced around us. Hope looked at me, her eyes blazing, tail twitching. I dropped to my knees, arms wide, and in that instant, she hobbled forward, trembling but steady, and fell into my embrace. I held her tight, my face buried in the soft fur that had started to grow back. My heart pounded, but this time it was pure joy. Rusty pressed in too, and the three of us locked into a strange, perfect embrace. An old man who had been lonely too long, an aging golden dog, and a black and tan pup once left to die on burning asphalt. Through my sobs I whispered, "We won. We're still alive." From then on, my house was never empty again. Each morning Hope shuffled laps across the yard, Rusty always jogging beside her, steady and faithful. I cooked every meal with care, watching Hope polish the bowl clean and look up at me with eyes that gleamed like sunlight. Once, when Maya called to check in, I turned on the camera. Hope was practicing in her wheelchair when she suddenly tried to lift her hind legs. Maya covered her mouth, tears welling. "Sir, this is something I never dared to dream." "She truly wants to live," Dr. Cole stopped by too. When he saw Hope pushing herself toward the porch, he just nodded, smiling softly. "Sometimes," he said, "medicine only explains half the story. The rest is love, and you've given her that." I bowed my head, tears burning. One evening, as the Dallas sky turned crimson with sunset, I sat in my old armchair. Hope lay her head on my lap, and Rusty rested his chin on my other leg. I stroked them both, my heart filled with a peace I thought I'd never feel again. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Sarah, do you see? I'm not alone anymore. I've found a new family through a miracle called hope." Hope lifted her head, her eyes shimmering in the fading light. In that gaze I saw a promise. Whether or not her legs ever carried her fully, she would live a life that mattered, because she would never be abandoned again. I spoke softly, voice breaking with gratitude. "Hope. You're not just hope. You're the reason my heart beats again after all these years of silence." Rusty sighed with contentment. Hope pressed closer into my arms, and I knew this was the ending no one could have imagined. A pup once collapsing on the scorching road, now the fire that lit an entire home. As I close this story, I still hear the steady beep of the monitor from that night in the operating room, still see those tiny legs trembling through their first steps. From a life thrown away on burning pavement, she had found her family, her reason to live. But I also know, out there, more hopes are waiting. Lost, trembling, praying for a hand to reach out. And you, have you ever saved a dog's life? If you have, please share your story in the comments so together we can spread kindness. Maybe your story will touch another heart and save another life. Let's not leave any dog abandoned or alone. Join me, Rusty, and Hope in building a home made of love. If you believe every life deserves a second chance, hit subscribe. Not just to hear more stories, but to be part of this journey of rescuing those the world forgot. From my heart to yours, thank you for listening and for loving.